Triceratops versus Columbian mammoth. Who would win in a fight? In one corner, we have a Super Saiyan kebab machine, and in the other corner, we have a temperamental elephant on steroids. Both of these animals are the most iconic prehistoric herbivores to roam the face of the earth. So, let's find out who would reign victorious. Size and physique. The Triceratops was a beast of an herbivore. It put deadly on a whole nother level. It lived in North America during the Late Cretaceous, 68 to 66 million years ago. Yes, this means that it fought the fearsome T.rex in an effort to stay alive. And in order to hold your own against a Tyrannosaurus, you have to be large and powerful. A typical Triceratops horridus weighed up to 8 tons and stood about 9 feet tall at the shoulder. This creature was nothing short of a living tank. In fact, its neck was protected by its huge bony frill. This would make attacks to that location very difficult. In addition to that, its physique was pretty stocky, and its body was covered in ossified scales. You know, the same material that crocodilians have. But how does the Triceratops compare to the mammoth? This prehistoric proboscis was one of the largest of its kind as well. The Columbian mammoth inhabited North America during the Ice Age up until about 10,000 years ago. It was pretty much the top animal of its environment, much like modern elephants today. And speaking of living animals, the Columbian mammoth's closest relative is the Asian elephant. This is made evident by its sloped posture and its body composition. This type of build allowed it to reach extreme sizes without straining its muscles. A bull Columbian mammoth could grow up to 11 tons in weight and 13 feet tall. When comparing it to the Triceratops, it's obvious that the mammoth has a height and weight advantage in this matchup. However, the Triceratops does have a lower center of gravity and a sturdier frame. So, on the topic of size and physique, I would say they are equal. Even though the mammoth does have a size advantage, I think the ossified scales of the Triceratops, along with its stockier physique, would allow it to close the size gap. But is reaching extreme sizes really more important than dexterity? That brings me on to my second point, which is speed and agility. Running would not be any of these animals' strong suits. It's pretty evident that their hefty weight and body structure would anchor them down, since you know gravity. But agility would be a different matter in itself. As you can see, both of these animals have a sloped posture, but in opposite directions. Our current understanding of the Triceratops is that its back legs were somewhat bent while the front limbs were straight for the most part. And on top of that, its back legs were also larger than its front ones. This means that it would be really good at turning and pivoting its hips. On the other hand, the mammoth swings wide. It would have similar agility to an elephant, which is okay but not the best. So, for the topic of speed and agility, I would have to award the Triceratops a point. Its superior hip mobility and springy physique would give it an advantage. And sure, being more nimble would be a nice trait, but it wouldn't mean much if you can't inflict crippling wounds to your opponent. That brings me on to the final aspect, which is weaponry and fighting IQ. When it comes to herbivores that you do not want to piss off, the Triceratops has to be at the top of the list. Nature crafted this Super Saiyan kebab machine in a uniquely unforgiving way. For starters, its head was connected to its body via a nigh-perfect spherical joint. This allowed the trike to have amazing head movement in brawls. On top of that, its meter-long horns were attached to its keratin-armored skull. This enabled its fighting style of ramming and goring, similar to a buffalo. Consequently, its kryptonite was intelligence. Since it had an armored skull and a simple lifestyle, its problem-solving skills were pretty bad. Its brain, which was small for its size, would have done poorly in abstract thinking and adapting to new scenarios. But how does the Triceratops compare to the Columbian mammoth? This proboscis is one of the largest of its lineage, so it's safe to say that its weaponry would also be sizable as well. This mammoth had lengthy, curved tusks made out of ivory, which could grow up to 10 feet. The general shape of its tusks were sloped sloped downwards and inwards. This suggests that it was used for smacking and sweeping, but not for goring. This was likely due to the fact that it was the largest animal of its environment, thus making the need for its weaponry to attack smaller, grounded carnivores. Besides its sturdy tusks, this proboscis had a powerful trunk that would have been used for manipulation and distraction, very much like modern-day elephants. On top of that, remember when I said the Triceratops' kryptonite was intelligence? Well, this is not the case for the Columbian mammoth. In fact, intelligence was one of its strong suits. Its brain casing appears to be very similar in composition to Asian elephants, suggesting that it had great adaptive and problem-solving skills. So, for the topic of weaponry and fighting intelligence, I would say they both are equal. The fighting styles of these two creatures would also be very similar. They both like to ram and use their mass to push around their opponents. In a head-to-head confrontation, the mammoth would have the reach advantage, a height advantage, and a lot more intelligence. However, the Triceratops has an armored skull, horns for stabbing, and a lower center of gravity. But, with all that being said, it's now time to determine a verdict. Alright, we have our stats. So, who would win in a fight between a Triceratops and a Columbian mammoth? Let's say this battle takes place in an open field. This would be a grueling clash, but I think the Triceratops would win with high difficulty. Its entire body is built more for brawling since it had to live among the T.rex. Its armored skull, hefty horns, and lower center of gravity would be problematic for the mammoth in the inevitable headbutting match. On top of that, its hip placement of being sloped upwards would make it more maneuverable, thus enabling it to gore the side of the mammoth, which would cause heavy blood loss and muscular damage. Overall, the Triceratops would use its goring horns and sturdier frame to win the fight.